Alright, so by the time this video drops, part 1 of season 3 of Chucky should be done. And I'm going to do this again, okay? I am hoping that the writing had some significant improvement. Even if it improved a little bit from this season, I'll be satisfied. This is truly a case of be careful what you wish for, because, yeah, I got what I wanted. I did say, even if it's a slight improvement, I'll be satisfied. And don't get me wrong, this was definitely an improvement from season 2, but not by much. If I had known they were going to pay that damn close attention to what I said, maybe I should have just aimed higher. Hello everyone, this is Darian of GNB Productions, and today we're going to be taking a look at Chucky Season 3. Chucky Season 3 released in October of 2023. Well, its first half at least, and the latter half released in early 2024. The season centers around our hack-and-sack trio on the hunt for Chucky so they can find Lexi's little sister, Caroline, while Chucky finds himself in the White House, having some deathly effects from Season 2's exorcism on his soul, aims to find the means to get back in the good graces of Damballa before his time runs out. Yeah, I might as well get to talking about this now because I'm gonna have my hands pretty full in October. Here we are in the 3rd season of Chucky. This show has had a pretty complicated run for me. Obviously, if you've seen my previous videos, you know that while it had its issues, I was quite fond of the first season. It had a decent blend of the campy elements of stuff like Bride and Seed, while maintaining a somewhat serious tone like the first couple films. Season 2 of the show tanked it hard for me, as it leaned way too much into the campier aspects of the franchise, whilst also generally feeling pretty aimless for a huge duration of the season. And now we have Season 3, a season which started off promisingly with introducing fresh and new ideas that shake up the story in an intriguing way, but then later on falls back into a few of the same problems that plagued the seasons prior. I'll go more in depth with this later, but everything in regards to our main trio just fell incredibly flat. They had no real interesting presence as characters, and honestly, if this season completely moved away from them, nothing much of value would be lost in my opinion. The season spends long chunks with them dragging their feet to accomplish a task that I personally couldn't find myself getting invested in. Everything else managed to be quite interesting though. I like how this season goes all in with the spiritual, ghosty aspect of this franchise. I know the show has been getting a lot of pushback for leaning into this stuff from diehard Chucky fans, claiming that this stuff is out of place for the franchise. When, I don't know, the series literally revolves around a dead man's soul possessing an inanimate object and going around killing people. Doing stuff like the spirit realm and stuff like that, to me, fits right at home in this series. I really think they did the most of what they could with it, and I'm thoroughly satisfied with what they pulled off in this regard. I also like how this season, and this may just be me reaching here, in a way harkens back to the Bride and Seed of Chucky days, where we put a bit more focus on Chucky as a character. As in, he has a specific goal in mind, and for a period we kind of follow him and his goal to have Damballa accept him back. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I thought it was a little interesting to go back to that type of story for the series. Not to mention, this season builds upon stuff introduced in the previous one in a pretty interesting way. Namely, the exorcism on Chucky being the cause of his newest predicament. That was something I really wasn't expecting to come back around, and I like how cleverly it ties into this season's narrative. There are other instances where they try to tie in previous story beats of the last season that don't really work as well, and I'll get to that when I get to it. But for the most part, I think they did a decent job at tying things together, which is way more than I could say for the second season. This season, when it comes to structure and pacing, surpasses the last season by a wide margin. With a much smaller cast than before, the season feels somewhat more streamlined, and overall just more focused as it doesn't really drag its feet like with Season 2. It's not perfect, however, because generally speaking, things do tend to get rushed, especially when we get closer to the end, but as a whole, the season paced itself fairly well. I especially love how they went about structuring and pacing the reveal of Chucky's big plan compared to the previous seasons. In the previous seasons, they went out of their way to have Chucky's plan be a mystery up until the last 1 or 2 episodes, whereas here, they let you know early on that he's counting down to something, and they finally reveal it almost within 2 episodes. I just like how the season doesn't like to waste its time meandering with its plot or characters. The tone for this season is interesting, because you can tell it strives to give more of a balance of the serious and campy tones of the last 2 seasons, but I feel like it just ended up falling flat on itself. Like, the wacky campiness is noticeably subdued compared to the previous season, but it's still very evident that a lot of that vibe and energy is still retained for better or for worse. I think to me, it just results in the whole vibe of the season being a bit confused as to what it really wants to go for with its tone. Stuff like the whole voodoo hospital thing was just... why? I already commend this season for leaning into the spiritual side of the series. That's something that I've wanted to see more of for ages, but then they pull some goofy shit like this, which does nothing but just frustrate me. To go about this in a pretty lame and uninventive way. And it's just stuff like that, or the reporter who got cut in half taking a picture before dying, which dips its toes a bit too much into the campier elements for my liking. And everything in regards to Tiffany was once again turned all the way up, but I'll go more into that when discussing the characters. And I guess I'll go into this now. The show still retains a bit of its meta humor and jabs, but it's significantly more subdued than last season. From Tiffany meeting what I assume is a Martha Stewart-like figure in prison, Chucky flipping through other horror doll movies, even getting in some admittedly funny jabs at Megan.
Little bitch, she stole my moves. Fuck you, my 3-gun.
This stuff doesn't plague the season like the last one, but I did feel the need to point it out. It's not terrible, but it did just leave me feeling kinda... meh. Something that also bothers me with this season, or this show rather, is that they still fully commit to removing or killing certain characters or elements of the show before we can really do anything interesting with it. For context, after the events of Season 2, the Hackensack kids were put under the care of Mrs. Fairchild, and right as we were getting little glimpses of potential intriguing dynamics and stories, they decide to fucking kill her off. The same goes for the reporter I mentioned earlier. After a death in the White House was discovered, she is shown to be rather skeptical of the explanation that was provided. And we get little scenes of her getting snippets of information, only for it to amount to nothing as she gets killed off before anything interesting can be done with it. Seriously, Mancini, why is this just something you love to do? Is it funny to you? Because all it does is piss me off. Anyway, the characters. The character writing in this season, for the most part at least, received a pretty noticeable increase in quality in my opinion. Now I'll be honest and say that goes for almost every character who isn't our main trio, but my point still stands. As I said, these three take a significant backseat when it comes to the overarching plot, Jake and Devin especially. It's really a shame because from Season 1 and even Season 2, I'd say that Jake was a pretty good protagonist. I know many weren't fond of his arc in Season 2, but I think it worked decently enough. But when it comes to this season, other than the final 2 episodes, he has literally nothing going for him. The entire duration of the season when it came to Jake, and even Devin, was the two wanting to have sex. That's it. There's no arc for either of them to go on or anything. Nope, they just want to fuck, and that's kind of freaking lame. Devin having nothing worthwhile to do is kind of par for the course in this show, but it really disappointed me with just how little Jake did throughout. That said, they did manage to do some interesting stuff in the last 2 episodes. Seeing him venture into the spirit realm and confront his father was something I wasn't expecting, and I think they executed it pretty well. I know him forgiving his dad may come out of left field for some, but I think it in a clever way circles back around to what he learned from the boarding school in Season 2, about forgiving others if you want to forgive yourself for your past sins. It may not be much, and I may just be reaching, but I like how that kind of worked its way back around in the end. That said, something I didn't like making its way back around into this season was the Good Chucky storyline. Now, I didn't hate this storyline in Season 2, but I did hate how very little was done with what Mancini revealed about the Good Chucky. That he was routinely switching between being good and evil, almost like a Jekyll and Hyde sort of deal. Them bringing this back once again resulted in almost nothing really interesting happening. Jake's role throughout the season was just incredibly underwhelming. The same goes for Devin, which, like I said, for this show is pretty par for the course. It's honestly embarrassing just how little Devin does throughout this show, if I'm being honest. Even Lexi's role in this season isn't that interesting. She was one of the breakout characters going from Season 1 to 2, and seeing her here having nothing going for her was pretty disheartening. Her strive to search for her sister Caroline wasn't that interesting, as I'll just say it right now, I don't give 2 shits about Caroline as a character. It doesn't help with the fact that we know that she isn't dead or nothing bad happened to her, as pretty early on we see she's very adamant in assisting Chucky. So nothing about this whole hunt for Caroline thing really kept me invested all that much. Another thing she has going on is a relationship with the US president's eldest son, Grant. I'll go further into him later, but I really couldn't get into this relationship. They really didn't have that believable chemistry, especially seeing as a good portion of their interactions revolves around her using him to get into the White House so the trio can find Chucky. So yeah, she really didn't have anything going for her that kept me invested either. Tiffany's role in this season is significantly lessened than before. Since she was framed for the death of Lexi's mom in season 2, she finds herself locked up and put on death row. She spends a majority of the season behind bars, trying to find a way to escape her fate. And everything revolving around Tiffany is just kind of the same stuff I complained about in season 2, where the campy nature of the character is just dialed all the way up and I can never really get into it. Tiffany doesn't really do much or have that major of a presence in the season up until the end. This character, in my opinion, has gone on way farther than she needed to. At least in this style. With the season ending with her back in doll form, I'm curious to see what else can be done with her. But otherwise, yeah, she was just kinda okay. I guess I'll get into this now. Legacy characters like Andy, Kyle, and Nika take an even bigger backseat than before. Andy and Kyle are just straight up not a part of this season at all, other than that fake out death with Andy, which was incredible, by the way. But if I'm being honest, I'm kind of glad these guys took a back seat, partly because it gave more room to a lot of the other stuff they wanted to tackle, but also they really wouldn't add much other than just cluttering stuff up. While the way the show used them previously was a bit meh, Season 2 provided a decent bit of closure to Andy and Kyle, at least as far as the series goes anyway. Nika's role this season was incredibly minor, but I still enjoyed her for the time she was on screen, even if she didn't do much. Now, I absolutely love all the stuff they did with Chucky this season. I love how we're back to the good old days where Chucky is on the clock and he needs to find a way to escape a particular fate or he's doomed forever. I like the development he had in Seed where he just prefers to stick with the doll body and fuck shit up. But I also love how the writers managed to play off of the style of the first 3 movies where we see Chucky get angry and frantic about his current predicament.
Joseph, what's wrong? Are you sick again?
I'm fucking dying!
It's just a neat way of bringing things back to basics. Seeing Chucky come to grips with what would potentially be a permanent death was pretty fun. Everything revolving around the whole Chucky and Damballa story, I just absolutely love and adore. Damballa has been an element of the franchise that has yet to be properly utilized, in this season going out of its way to have Chucky abandoned by Damballa after Season 2's exorcism was a brilliant idea. And going further with that, seeing the unique ways they utilize the spiritual side of this series and having Chucky kill as a spirit was genuinely amazing. One of the major highlights of the whole series, if you ask me. Characterization-wise, Chucky as always is pretty good. They toned down the over-the-top campiness of his persona from Season 2, which I'm incredibly grateful for. Chucky, like always, was a blast this season. No played-out gimmicky BS like in Season 2, just good old Chucky fun. I guess I'll bring this up now, but the gimmick of having Chucky in the White House, I think was handled fairly well. With this type of setting in this kind of franchise, I think there was a cause for concern when it comes to absurd political humor and satire, but nah. They played things relatively straight for the most part. It wouldn't have bothered me personally, but I could just imagine all the dumb uproar stuff like that would have caused. Not to mention, the reasoning behind how and why Chucky's here was pretty inventive, I'd say. A tad forced, yeah, as Chucky needed to find an evil enough place to try and give Damballa sacrifices if he wanted to get in his good graces again. And he chose the White House, because why the hell not? Anyway, Caroline, like I said, I didn't really care for. Her role was pretty minuscule, only being in about 2 episodes. But if there's a positive I do have, it's that it's cool to actually see Chucky have a killer apprentice. Let's just hope they don't do away with her too quickly and actually properly utilize her for the future. In regards to our characters, something I wasn't expecting to be as interesting as it was the presidential family. This is what I was mainly referring to when saying that the character writing got a decent increase in quality, because everything surrounding these guys kept me fairly invested throughout the season. The family reeling from the death of their youngest son and how each member deals with it was genuinely interesting. I'm surprised they managed to make each member extremely compelling in their own way. The boy Henry getting attached to Chucky through believing it's his dead brother was honestly pretty sad and endearing. The president as well I found to be pretty compelling too. You can see he's genuinely a well-meaning guy who just wants the best for his family and country. And all of this with seeing the ghost of his son, just starting to see it all unraveling, was, like I said, pretty compelling. Even though he didn't do that much, it was honestly sad to see his character go, given all the stuff he'd been through. Usually when they kill off a character before any more can be done with them, it irritates me, but I think they managed to work around it well enough. The First Lady and everything revolving around her and CIA agent Price, who I'll get into in just a bit, cleaning up Chucky's messes was pretty intriguing. Her drive to protect what little of her family she has left is commendable and really easy to sympathize with. Grant is the one I'm a bit iffy on, because he has this kind of corny, cool dude front he puts on, but secretly has more going on with him kind of thing. He's a well-meaning and good kid, but anytime he says or does something endearing, he says or does some corny and cringy shit that kind of takes me out of it. That's kind of the main problem I have with the thing between him and Lexi. Not only because a majority of the time it doesn't really feel like they like each other, like at all. Like I mentioned previously, Lexi, more often than not, it seems like she's just trying to find ways to get close to Chucky. But with Grant, it's not all that better because it kind of just feels like he likes her because she's hot, I guess. I know they have their little moments bonding over dead relatives and stuff, but none of it really flowed or felt all that natural. Price is, I guess, what you would consider a secondary antagonist to Chucky, but also kinda not. Throughout the season, he was very morally ambiguous, aiming to do whatever it takes to defend this country and all that. For the duration of the season, I liked this shady character. He had a chill and low-key demeanor to where it felt like, for the most part, he was relatively on top of things and was pretty cool. Until the last episode where he just goes full-on evil for no real reason. Like, seriously, bombing the White House is one thing, but the scene where he stays behind and tries to take everyone else out just felt a little out of left field. That's not to say it was out of character for him to do so, but I don't know, that escalation of his character just didn't feel all that natural to me. Yeah, overall, the character writing was pretty good this time around. The same can also be said for the performances. Everyone did a pretty good job performance-wise. As for our trio, I think I've said about as much as I can about them in my previous videos. Olivia is undoubtedly the best, with Zachary doing a pretty good job as well. I'll say, by the end, he really started to flex his acting chops, because Chucky at one point possesses Jake's body, and Arthur does an incredible impression of the voice.
You know, Timmy, you're gonna be real popular on the other side. I made a few friends in there. Told them to keep an eye out for you. So just be sure to tell them Chucky sent you.
Devin's actor Bjornvin once again did a decent job, but the writers never really give him anything interesting to do. Jennifer Tilly, as always, does a good job, but the over-the-top direction they keep taking with Tiffany is just never really up my alley. Fiona Dourif, as always, does an exceptional job as Nika, and even the younger Charles Lee Ray. Nice to see her making a return to this Chucky, at least. And her playing off of her father, Brad Dourif, was really damn cool. Speaking of which, Brad fucking Dourif. Not only did Brad, as always, do a great job voicing Chucky, it was such a treat to see him physically play Charles Lee Ray after so long. Like, he was fucking incredible. He fits as good in the role physically as he does doing the voice. It was just amazing to have him in this, I'm sorry. Devon Sawa, of course, returns to play not only the President of the United States, but also the President's double, Randall. As always, Devon Sawa absolutely kills it in both of these roles. I love how much he disappears into these roles where they feel vastly different from each other. We have a few returning faces from the previous seasons, like Laura Jean, who played Sister Ruth in Season 2, returning as the First Lady, who did an exceptional job. I'm glad Mancini chose to have her return, because she was just incredible. As well as Michael Theriel, who played the pervy psychiatrist in Cult of Chucky, as well as Lexi's dad in Season 1. He did a decent job as well. Alex Vincent, for his one episode appearance, did a pretty good job too. The kid that plays Henry did a great job. Definitely gotta say, he's probably tied with Alex Vincent when it comes to adorable kids in this franchise. The guy that played Grant also did a pretty decent job. I guess since she's a relatively important character now, I'll comment on her. Karina Batrick does a pretty decent job as Caroline as well. I didn't comment on her in the previous seasons because she was a pretty nothing character, and her performance wasn't that noteworthy. But since then, she's seen some great improvement, I'd say. Caroline as a character I may not be that interested in, but her performance this season still somewhat stood out. She gives Caroline the right amount of sass that pairs off with Chucky surprisingly well. Like I said, the cast overall did a pretty good job. Something else I adore about this season is that it was bloody. The practical and gore effects in this season, I don't know what changed, but they looked fucking amazing. Now, that's not to say they looked bad in the previous seasons, but the effects here received a noticeable uptick in quality. All the kills this season trumps the stuff from the previous ones by a wide margin, just based on how fucking gnarly they are. From Chucky ripping out the president's eyes, to that lady boiling her face off, the chandelier falling at the White House, Chucky slitting that lady's neck to where it snaps back like a Pez dispenser, the fucking umbrella kill. I think I made my point clear. The gore is top fucking notch. Everything else effects-wise can be very hit or miss. The effects on the doll are, as always, pretty good. I'm still not too fond of the design philosophy they took on in Season 2, carrying over into this season. But regardless, it looks fine enough. What's crazy is that in some scenes they change up the effects on the doll to have it look a bit more meaner during a few of the kill scenes, and if I'm being honest, I would have preferred this be his default look for this season compared to what we usually get. It kind of reminds me of his look in Child's Play 3. I miss when Chucky looked like an angry-ass, mean-ass little demon, but it's whatever, I guess. This season carries on the tradition of giving fresh and unique takes on the Chucky look. The old and withered Chucky is truly one of the best looks given to the character. The level of gross detail as it looks so decayed is really damn cool. Everything else is a bit iffy, because in the later half of the season they do tend to use a bit of green screen, and it looks like dog shit. I can give a bit of leeway to them because they were likely rushing due to trying to beat the actor and writer strike at the time, but it doesn't change the fact that a lot of this looks like ass. Overall, Season 3 of Chucky turned out to be just okay. That may sound a tad shocking considering how positive I've been towards this season, and I'll get into why in just a sec, but overall, the season is structured and paced fairly well. It introduces new and exciting elements into the franchise that plays off of stuff we've known before in pretty interesting ways. Diving into the supernatural more with ghosts and spirit realms and whatnot was a genuine welcome for this series, and I love what they did with this stuff. The character writing was a bit more engaging this time around as well. There were no breakout characters that stood out like our poor Nadine, but overall, the characters were done pretty well. The gore and kills were as bloody as ever, and the practical effects were top fucking notch. But everything revolving around our supposed main characters really left a lot to be desired. They took a major back seat and were just left with nothing really interesting to do. Jake and Devin were as boring as ever, and Lexi with her thing with Grant or her search for Caroline really left me with nothing to feel all that engaged with. Not to mention, the tone still carries on a bit of the goofy, campy energy, which, as I've expressed, just isn't my thing when it comes to Chucky. Yes, it's not as prominent as last season, but they do lean on it in a few instances a bit too much, where I think we would have benefited from actually establishing more cool shit relating to this franchise. I'm looking at you, Voodoo Hospital. But that doesn't really sound like it's grounds for me to call the season as a whole mediocre, does it? Well, as per usual with this series, the finale kind of muddies up how I view this season. I'll briefly go over the episode and why it leaves me feeling the way that I do. The finale has Jake venture into the spirit realm in an attempt to find the good version of Chucky in hopes to have him sacrifice his soul so they can be done with all this. Also to find out where Caroline is. But it was all a trap to have Chucky possess Jake's body, which, like I said, was really cool. Chucky in Jake's body then takes Devin and Lexi to find Caroline, where it's revealed she's been staying with Wendell Wilkins, the creator of the Good Guy dolls. Where Chucky re-enters his doll form, and they then tease a mysterious fate for our three heroes. Cut to Tiffany after making an intense escape from prison, making it to the Wilkins household. Still keeping it ambiguous as to what happened to the trio, we then have Tiff and Chucky reconcile, and Tiffany re-enters a doll body. They then ride off along with Caroline to who knows where. Nika then makes it to the Wilkins household shortly after, by somehow following a tracker of some kind. They never really explained what the fuck was going on there. Where she looks on in horror at the trio trapped in these nasty-ass, fuck-ugly-ass abomination marionette puppets. And the season ends with us not knowing the fate of Nika, and just having Chucky, Tiffany, and Caroline ride off into the sunset. Okay, this finale was something. Alright, everything in this finale I loved, except for the last 10 to 15 minutes. If they wanted to end things on a cliffhanger, I think ending it with Chucky in Jake's body would have been significantly more effective than what we actually got. Because I just would have loved to have seen more of Zachary Arthur's performance as Chucky. I really think the Tiffany character has overstayed her welcome, and given where the show has gone with her, I just can't bring myself to get excited about her doll shenanigans with Chucky. Speaking of which, I'm so fucking sick and tired of the back and forth bullshit with these two. If you're gonna have them together, keep them together. If you're gonna have them apart, keep them apart. This shit is just getting stale now. The next thing is honestly more of a nitpick than anything else, but the doll-bodied Chucky finds himself in is said to be the prototype of the good guy doll. I low-key think this was a missed opportunity to give Chucky a more updated design. Since this is the prototype, it makes sense why he wouldn't look the same as every other good guy. Maybe make his hair a darker red, give him some brighter overalls. Hell, maybe give his shirt some yellow stripes like in the remake. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but I just wish we got something unique. But then we of course have to talk about the fucking puppets. In the context of this being the creator of the good guy, this iconic looking doll, it's incredibly disappointing that when it comes to our main trio getting doll forms, they're relegated to these ugly ass puppets with really god awful CGI faces slapped onto them. Yeah, this was really not the best note to end this season on. This season wasn't terrible, but the finale, and especially that ending, just left me with an overwhelming feeling of mediocrity. As I said before with my positives, I loved a lot of what this season had to offer, but that rushed ending and odd conclusion just kind of muddied the whole thing for me. At the time of me making this, they have yet to confirm the season 4 that Mancini pitched, but he has come out and talked about making another Chucky movie. While the season was airing, I very much got the feeling that this had the makings of a final season, and I still think it could be. Whether they continue the story in a movie or leave the fate of our trio in a pretty grim place, I'm not sure which I'd prefer, honestly. This season was thoroughly enjoyable except for the final episode, which is why I found it to just be mediocre. It ain't bad by any means, it's of course better than season 2, but that ain't really that high of a bar to beat. The handling of our supposed main characters, the very meh tone, the whack as hell ending, all just put a sour taste in my mouth. Yeah, this season was just mediocre.
So, with all that said, if you agree or disagree with anything I've said in this video, let me know right down there in the comments below. Also be sure to like and subscribe. This is Darion of GNB Productions, and take care.